Hi, everyone. We do a lot of litigation and personal injury and property management. In about 2015, I started owning and managing property for other people. And over the last 9 or 10 years, I've gotten up to a point where I manage about 100 plus units and do a lot of real estate issues, evictions, and other legal real estate matters. So if you want to buy a used manufactured home, which is what the purpose is of this tutorial, try to not make it seem like a course as much as I can, but there really is no avoiding some of that. So let's get started. A manufactured home, also referred to as a mobile home, is a completely different structure that's regulated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. HUD regulations are different than stick-built regulations. Some of the major differences is the roof loads that are allowed, the comfort zones for insulation purposes, the quality of the windows and doors that are on manufactured homes. Manufactured homes in the used variety, you're probably going to look at either what's called a single wide or a double wide. A single wide is anywhere from as little as 8 feet and as much as 18 feet. But most of the time, when you're looking at a single wide, you're looking at anywhere between 8, 12, maybe 14, maybe 16 feet wide. So we'll say between 8 and 16 feet wide. As far as length goes, these units can be as little as 40 feet long and as much as 80 feet long. And all of them have axles and hitches on them during which they can be transported. The second variety is a double wide. A double wide is basically two single wides that are then squeezed together and then bolted together to make a wider unit. So these units may be somewhere between 12 and 18 feet wide on each side. And when you put them together, they will be a total width of approximately 28 feet or 30 feet or 32 feet. These homes also have the same lengths as a single wide. They can be as short as 40 feet and as long as 80 feet. The roof pitch on these is very important. If you're going to buy a used manufactured home, you got to make sure that you don't have to take half the roof off to get it under a bridge. So first, where do you find these houses? Places like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or website of banks that have them up for foreclosure or have taken them back in foreclosure. Most likely, you're going to be dealing with a private person, and either they're moving up to a stick-built house, or they're moving out of the area, or the park that they're in is kicking them out. It could be a variety of reasons. So that's more of the private side. And then on the foreclosure or bank-owned side, you're going to deal with some representative of a bank who's going to give you the address. You're going to go out and look at it, and they've got the property back because they mortgaged the property or loaned money on the property, and they were not returned their money. So they started a foreclosure action and took over the property. Made a checklist of things to pay attention to, and I'll go through it. First thing you want to do before you even go out to look at the house, you want to ask a few different questions. How long is it? How wide is it? What year is it? Do they have a title for it? And are the axles and hitch underneath the house? And so those are your first basic questions. You also want to make sure that there is the source of heat is functioning and that the electricity is still connected. because when you go through to do your walkthrough, there's no way to check and see if the furnace is working, or there's no way to test the electricity in the house unless it's connected. It doesn't mean you can't purchase it, but buyer beware. Sometimes these houses may be sitting for quite a bit of time, and so you don't know what the situation is. So this is more aligned for New York State. Beginning in 1995, manufactured homes were issued a title. Before 1995, there is no title. Most of it handled by what's called a bill of sale. And we'll get into a little bit of a detail about bill of sales and, how important they are and what should be in them. The only way that home can be free and clear is if the title has no liens on it, or a bill of sale on a home before 1995 that shows that house is them and that they have the right to sell it to you. And you want a copy of that if you decide to go forward with sale. Oh, even if you're just doing a title transfer for money, it's not a bad idea to have an additional bill of sale that goes into more detail about the particulars of what's involved. So for a bill of sale, you want to make sure that you talk about the money. You want to make sure that the description on your manufactured home is accurate. You want to make sure that you make it clear who's moving the house, when they're going to move the house. The seller may ask for a copy of the permit for the fellow that's going to move the house, and the seller may ask for insurance for the mover that's going to move the house. And from your end, you want those same things too, because once you buy the house, you want to make sure your mover has plenty of insurance in case he's going down the road and all of a sudden the house blows away or falls sideways, or could be a million things that can happen, or blows off the roof and hits somebody else's car, or etc. The number of hazards potential. So you want to make sure the bill of sale has all the details: the year, the brand, the size, the serial number, the model, the HUD plate. And you want to make sure that the seller will warrant it against anybody coming out of the woodwork and making a claim against the house. And you want to have a little description about what they're leaving behind and what they're taking and how they're going to leave the house. Obviously, if you're buying it from a bank, it's as is. And there could be a lot of garbage and junk and stuff inside the house. Be aware that the mover will not move the house unless those items are moved or taken out of the house first, because they can pose a serious weight or shifting hazard or breakage hazard during the move. You want to set a date for the move, and you want to put in language that isn't your date, because there's many times that the mover has called me and said, well, we can't do it this week, or, oh, I went out and I looked at the house and this can be done before I can move it. The next thing is the sign certificate that's inside the house. This is a one-page document, and you can find it next to the hot water heater. And the hot water heaters in these manufactured homes are hidden, usually in a closet, in a bedroom, behind a panel. But they could also be under the kitchen sink, which is a terrible place for it to be, because that's the one place that's going to get wet, has the chance to get wet. Sometimes they put it in the upper cabinet in the kitchen. But regardless, you really want to find that, because without it, you're not going to be able to compare the information from the house with the HUD plate, which we'll talk about in a second, outside. And, you be knowledgeable enough and make sure that the house that you're purchasing can handle the roof load or snow for your area, and also the comfort zone and the wind. So, your comfort is not that big a deal. Most of these are either gas or oil or propane furnace with a trunk that goes down the middle. And usually the furnaces have enough BTUs in them to handle it's about any size, single or double wide. But more important is the snow load for the roof. As I said, because these houses have HUD standards, there's a southern zone, a middle zone, and a northern zone. And the rafters and the roofs are built to different strengths depending on where you are. Obviously, if you're in the south and you don't have to worry so much about snow, but you be somewhere where you have to worry more about the wind. And as you come more to the north, you have to worry more about the snow and maybe not so much the wind. Next thing I want to talk about, that's usually on one of the ends of the houses. You can find it. It's usually a PFS number, and it certifies that the home is a manufactured home. And this is very important because most codes officers in jurisdictions will always look for this stamp. So you want to make sure that you can find it and locate it. And if you can't, then you would seriously, unless you're putting it somewhere where you don't need a codes inspection down the road, or maybe it's going on a farm for farm workers or something like that, where they're not necessarily regulated as much by codes enforcement. That's one thing. But if your it needs to have that metal HUD label on it. So now, what do? Make your appointment. You want to go out and look at the house. Hey, buddy, by the way, is the electric still on? Is the heat source still on? Is there a hitch underneath the house? And are the axles still there? When you go out, what you want to do is start on the outside. You want to measure the length and the width, and you want to check the roof pitch. The roof pitch is very important because anything over a 312 roof pitch is not going to fit under most of the bridges where the manufactured home has to travel through. If you have manufactured, the pitch is higher than that, then there's a midsection on your manufactured home that actually has to come out for the house to be moved. Then you want to look for whether it has a metal roof. Metal roofs are more problematic because you don't know who installed the metal roof. And when a house goes through through travel to speeds as high as 55, 60, maybe more miles an hour, and there's a good chance that these metal roofs may fly off. And that's a problem because the metal roof, once the wind picks it up and grabs it, if there's any vehicles around it, it could do some serious threatening damage and injury. So can you move a house with a metal roof? Absolutely. But your mover has to be aware of it. And your mover will either put on additional tie downs that, span across the different locations, or add additional screws to tighten it down. Next thing you want to look at is underneath the house. A manufactured home is two long steel beams that span the length of, in the case of a single wide, the whole unit, or in the case of a double wide, two on each half span the length of the unit. This steel beam needs to be in good condition. And there's many houses that I've looked at where from the outside, you cannot tell what the condition of these steel beams are. And so you have to be able to take the skirting off and go with a high-powered flashlight and be able to run that flashlight all the way down so you can inspect that steel beam. Because if there's any kind of rot in the steel beam, like you see in the picture here, then you have a manufactured house that cannot be moved. So if this is a deal killer, if you see any kind of rot underneath on the main frame of the house, you need to walk away immediately. While you're under there, look for the hitch and also for the axles. Now, on the hitch is what goes in front of the house, and there's 4 contact points on the hitch, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. And the hitch itself should have those matching contact points. And if it doesn't, or if there's no hitch, then you need to possibly employ a welder to come out after you find a hitch and weld on the hitch onto the manufactured home. There's welders with trucks come out and weld it. It's usually a 2-person job, and it can be achieved. Your mover can handle it, but he's going to charge you extra money for it. So you have to be aware of these things and think about the additional expense as we go down the road for cost. Next thing you want to look at is the axles in the back and whether the tires are still there and whether the tires are still roadworthy. Many times these tires are no longer going to be roadworthy, so you want to make sure that axles are there. If you look underneath, you'll see how many axles the house was designed for. Most of the time, we'll leave those axles underneath, but a lot of the times, especially on the newer homes, the movers will take axles back because then they can turn around and sell them to somebody else. So you may end up without those axles after the house has been delivered. So you want to make sure those are there. Again, your mover can obtain more axles depending on, it can. Just becomes an issue of cost for them to purchase and install those axles. Next thing you want to look at is porches. Porches are a problem. If the porch is attached to the house, then it has to be detached from the house. And sometimes you may require a demolition permit, detach the home from the house. And sometimes you may be able to get away without one. But if the codes officer requires you to have a demolition permit, then that means you have to get an asbestos survey done and make sure that that porch that you're knocking down before you can take the house out doesn't have any asbestos in it. So my recommendation is I pictured 3 different porches here, and the first one is probably about as far as I would go on a porch that would be acceptable to me, because I can cut those rafters at the top and easily yank the rest of the porch out with a chain. But the second picture and the third picture that I've put in here, those are much more involved, and I would from those houses if I had the choice. Next thing you want to look at is the windows. And the old manufactured homes, anything built before, I don't remember the year off the top of my head, but at some point they switched it, and now they put real windows in manufactured homes. But for a long time, the windows in a manufactured home were nothing but 2 storm windows, one on the outside and one on the inside. And honestly, these are garbage. They need to be replaced. Do they have some insulating value? Absolutely they do. Could you fill up the gap in between the 2 storm windows with some insulation? Yes, but it's going to look like crap. My suggestion is that when you go in the house, you count the number of windows. Usually these are very standard size windows, so you can get them at most manufactured home part stores around you. And there's usually probably one within about an hour or so from you. And they usually have in stock, because there's only about 6 different sizes on these windows. And they usually will have in stock these windows for you to purchase. And remember, these windows come in either new construction or replacement style. And your mobile home parts dealer is probably only going to have the new home construction variety, which means you have to pull the inner and the outer out, and then take some of the siding down around the window and put the window in, weather tight it, and then put the siding. The trick that I sometimes will use or do is I will leave the outer storm window intact, and I will get a replacement window that tucks up that outer storm window, and that kind of that storm window, it gives you sort of the best of, get the window on the inside that's a replacement, and then you can keep the storm window on the outside, which gives you a negligible but additional level of insulation value and also wind protection. Okay. Next, as you walk through the house, you want to look for water leaks. Now, some of these are going to be super obvious because you're going to see some black mold growth around these areas. And some of them are not going to be as obvious until you pull the floor up and you see the water damage. A lot of times, the best thing to do is to walk through the house and basically step on every foot or so of the floor, and you're going to feel some soft spots, especially around doors, especially around windows, because these are the places where there's more exposure to the elements. Also in the bathrooms, anywhere where the plumbing is there. So, kitchen sink, the hot water heater, the toilets. Toilets are notorious for spots around them. On the shower, you're not going to be able to see if any of the shower hookups have been leaking or there's a time that have turned moldy in the shower. But over time, you want to, if it's not a repair, but eventually you want to, if you have a shower, you want to go behind the shower and pull that panel off and make sure that there's no mold growth in there and that nothing serious is leaking. But these are, again, things that you should be making a list of as you walk through the house, and so that you can negotiate a better price. There's products like quite easily. The cheap man's way is to just get Windex and saturate the area. So I would do a cutout of the area of the old gypsum or the old drywall, and then spray the heck out of it with Windex or some kind of other product, and then go over it with some Kills paint, and then replace the insulation, and then replace the gypsum. Skylights are notorious for leaking in manufactured homes. Anything that's over 10 years old is very likely going to be leaking. My answer to that, to eliminate them. And my answer for roofs on these older houses is that I go over it with a metal roof. And so when I go over it with the metal roof, now it's set for years. I feel comfortable that it's been installed correctly, and I eliminate the skylights. I replace all of the older windows. I replace any windows that have fog in them, or you can tell that the seal's been broken because there's moisture or condensation in them. Replace any of the windows where the mechanicals on them have been broken or don't work. So these are all a list of expenses and things that you have to take care of. And as I said, look for soft spots on the floor. You're not going to catch all of them, so you pull the floor out. But when I do, I basically rip out, unless somebody very soon before me has done a nice vinyl floor, I will pull out all the carpets, which, just the allergens, and those carpets are just not worth it. And in a manufactured home, I buy vinyl flooring that comes with a pad already installed on it, pre-padded, you call it, I guess, whatever you call it. And I go through the entire house, and I'll change and put in brand new vinyl flooring throughout the house. The vinyl flooring is good. It lasts for a long time. You can cheap out with as little as a 6 millimeter vinyl flooring, or you can go to as high as a 20 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring. And that's your choice. If you're purchasing a manufactured home to put it in your park, and once you're done, you're going to sell it, well, you may want the cheapest possible flooring. But if you're going to have a manufactured home that you're going to rent in your park, or you're going to rent on your lot, or you're going to rent on your property, or you're going to live in, then you want to give it the higher grade, better quality. So you may be as low as $1 per square foot for vinyl flooring, and as much as $5 a square foot for vinyl flooring. There's all sorts of price points in between. Okay, next thing you want to talk about is the furnace. The furnace in these manufactured homes, generally manufactured home somewhere out in the boonies. So there is probably electrical, but that's about it. And the heat source is either oil, propane, or kerosene. It's very infrequent that I see a home that has a gas furnace, because most of these homes, as I said, are not installed in places where there's gas hookups. So that's a big furnace from oil to propane. Well, let's say you don't like oil. You don't want a big 275-gallon oil tank on the outside of your house, or maybe the park you're going to doesn't allow it anymore, or whatever. There could be a multitude of reasons. So you need to switch from oil to propane. I've even seen manufactured homes where the heat source is a wood stove outside. You know, the water comes back in, goes through the furnace blows air and heats up the place. But that's the easiest, cleanest deliverable fuel is propane. You can put 220-gallon tanks in parallel next to either side or back of the home, which are easily concealed and easily filled up. Okay, now, once you have your checklist, looked at everything that is going to cost you a tremendous amount of money to fix, then that's when you want to negotiate with the seller. Some of the things that you also need to pay attention to when you go inside, as I said, electrical and plumbing are the two most important things inside, in addition to the furnace, the heat source. And I would bring one of those plug-ins if you have power. Very, very many times you may not have electricity running through it. But if you have power, check all the plugs and light switches and make sure everything works the way it should. And for plumbing, open the kitchen sink cabinets, look underneath, run the water for 5 minutes, listen for leaks, look for leaks, and nothing is perfect on the age of these homes, but at least you can use those and figure out how much it's going to cost you. Hot water heaters, make sure the hot water works. A lot of times these older homes, the elements have been shot, and so you may get only lukewarm hot water as opposed to nice piping hot water. So those are important to look at in addition to all the other stuff that we talked about. So what you need to do is, before you get to the house, get the basic information about the house, the year, the model, the size. And then you can go on a website called JD Power Connect, which is essentially the Blue Book. And they have a valuation where you can get a report on a manufactured home, used one. And so it's, according to here, the last time I checked, is $35 for a basic and $55 for a professional. And a lot of times these reports will not have your exact manufactured home model and serial number and this and that. So what you do is you use the SVS option, and you do length and width, year and manufacturer, and it gives you a general number, and then it asks you for the condition. And I would put it in as an average condition, and it'll pop out a price for you. I'd print that out and I'd bring it with me. And then after you're done doing your inspection of the home, then I would say, okay, well, here's what the home is worth. But in reality, here's a list of the 15 things I have to do to this house. And in addition to that, here's how much it's going to cost me to move this house. So what's the bottom line number you'll take? And negotiate back and forth and see if you can come up with a number. So then after that, let's say there's a meeting of the minds and you two, the seller and you an agreement as to what the price should be. At that point, before you do anything else, you want to just basically give a small deposit. And before you go there, hopefully you've already investigated and researched movers and had a conversation with one or two of them, because a lot of these movers, they're not huge companies, and they're not well, they cut corners. They have to be in New York State. In order to work on a manufactured home, you have to have a mechanic's license. In order to install a manufactured home, you have to have an installer's license. And in order to sell a manufactured home, a new one, you have to have a dealer's license. So I have, over the last so many years, only used one company, and that's Clayton. And Clayton is a multi-million-dollar company. They're well insured. I trust them. They show up when they tell you they're going to show up, and they will come out and they will look at the house before they have to move it, and they will tell you exactly how much it's going to cost and send you an estimate. And they're reputable, they're good people, and if they can't do it, they will tell you, I can't do it. And so you don't want to get yourself caught in a trap where, on the one hand, you've agreed to purchase this manufactured home, but now the mover comes out and takes a look at it and he says, this is not movable, or this is going to be it's much to move this as I thought it was going to cost. Manufactured home can cost $3,000 on a single wide going a short distance that already has axles and a hitch, all the way up to $15,000 to move on a double wide that needs hitches, axles, and weatherproofing. And that doesn't installation. The installation and this arrives at your location. That's up to you. So you have to be very, very careful and cautious. And this is probably one of the major reasons why buying a used manufactured home doesn't make sense unless you're going to keep it where it is. And so the parks have an advantage in that scenario, because they'll buy the manufactured home from the old owner, and they can usually do a little bit of a better price than somebody who's going to move it, because they're going to keep it in the same lot and in the same place, and it's going to have been grandfathered in. If you're moving the manufactured home, where you're going to bring it to has to have a pad. New York State, it's a requirement now that it be a 12-inch concrete pad with rebars in it. So again, those are additional things to have. I put in some pictures here of homes that I purchased and moved into my parks. And so like this is the first one. This essentially came to me free. I just had to pay for moving it. But we looked at the house and the bones were good. Everything was, there wasn't major leaks. It's a 1980s model, but see from the outside pictures, and it did have a roof leak in a couple places, but nothing that I couldn't fix. And you can see how I transformed the inside and the outside and made it a much more appealing manufactured home. And here's another one. You can see the kitchen on was in terrible shape. So this was an added expense. I had to rip out the entire kitchen and start over. I talked a little earlier about the condition of the home as far as junk that's inside. This one I had to get a 30-yard dumpster over before I moved it, and filled it up with, as you can see, mattresses and chairs and tables and God knows what else. So that's an additional expense that you have to bear, because in this situation, the owner had passed away, and these were the children that I purchased it from. So you have to be very aware of that. You can see before and after picture of what I was able to do with it. Bathrooms can be a major expense. Usually you can save the shower or bath enclosures, but most likely you're going to want to replace the vanity and the toilet and the flooring and add some additional lighting like I did here. So here's an invoice of very basic move that was essentially just a few miles down the road, and that cost me almost $3,000. And then I have another one here that you can see, which is $9,000. And this was a double wide. Again, another very basic move within about 60 miles. And we got all the way $9,000. And this price, this is just to disassemble it, weatherproof it, and move it, the number of miles that you moved, and then it's delivered and left there. And you still have to put the if it's a double wide, which in this case it was, you still have to put the two halves together, and you still have to fix the roof line, and you still have to insulate the cracks, and you still have to put jacks underneath it, and you need to make sure that you have a proper pad. And I've given you some pictures of these. Okay, so when the manufactured home location, you need to get codes, and you need to get a zoning permit, and these are expensive, time consuming, and there are regulations. You have to make sure that your codes officer allows you to actually install a manufactured home on the lot that you want to put it on. You have to make sure that you have the proper setbacks. If you're not hooking into a sewer line, then you need to make sure that you have an adequate septic system in the back. You want to make sure that your home is properly set up and done with all of these, the water line, the electric conduit, sewer line, the septic system. These need to be done before you can install that house. And the way you install the house is they bring the house, and the installer will have what's called a tug, and they'll right onto your concrete pad or gravel pad or whatever your codes officer allows. And once it's on, then if it's a double wide, they tuck it together. And if the roof pitch is higher than what we talked about, then they have to build that additional piece of the roof. The siding has to go back on. They have to put jacks underneath it. They have to level it. They have to connect the water and the sewer lines. Some of them will do the gas lines for you or the oil lines for you. Some of them won't. Some of them will hook up the electric for you. Some of them won't. So these are additional costs, which can run as much as an additional $5,000 to do that, just to install the house. And whether you buy one new or you buy a used one, this cost doesn't go away. The installation cost is always going to be there. And then finally, after you're done installing it, you have to skirt it. And skirting can be an additional $3,000 or $4,000, probably 50% material, 50% labor. And the house still isn't done. You still have to put porches on it. You're going to have two major means of ingress and egress. And the porch that you put on cannot use the house as support. So it has to be self-standing. So there's going to be an additional cost because you need a stronger porch that doesn't use the side of the house as one side of its base. So these are all considerations that there could be more things. You may need a driveway, because I usually put them in one of my parks. So I already have the driveways and the roads done, but you're going to need that. Putting it on in your lot, you're going to have to get 911. You're going to have to get National Grid service. You're going to have to get, if you have gas hookup, you're going to have to get, and I said National Grid, but your power company. Maybe you want to see how much it would cost to get high-speed cable there. These are all, you want to make sure they're properly registered on the 911 register or spreadsheet or whatever they have over there for 911 calls. So these are all factors that you need to take into account, and none of this is cheap. And this is one of the major reasons why used manufactured homes go down in value. Because, first of all, the people that lived in most of them, didn't treat them well. If they ever have to be moved, you're looking at anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to move it and set it in your new place. And you still are going to have some of that stigma of having a manufactured home. You're not ever going to have a basement, which can be solved with a nice sized shed. But again, these are important things to consider. And then finally, you need to get a certificate of occupancy. And once you get the certificate of occupancy, you can take a sigh of relief because now you're done. This is not this is the process. You can't just go out there, look at a house and pay somebody a certain thousand number of dollars and be done with it. You have to take your time. You have to look at all the potential pitfalls that make it impossible to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Now, is that still a good value? Sure. Manufactured homes that go on private lots can go up in value quite a bit, mainly because they're already on a lot. Manufactured homes that are in parks, can they go up in value? You're always going to have the lot rent. But then again, you're always going to have property taxes on a stick-built home. So the manufactured home, for about the same amount of money as you pay in taxes, divided monthly, provides you with or more services than the taxes give you for your manufactured home, then that's a good deal. And, if your roads are plowed, water is cleaned, and you're really dealing with one person instead of, one small group instead of the town codes officer and the town this and the village this and that and those kinds of things. So I think that about wraps it up. I'm Mo Atari. I'm an attorney. I manage property. I have my feet well into most of these different things, and I can take you through the process. I'm not free, and I can give you advice about it, or I can handle it for you or manage it for you. But basically, I'm going to do what I described in this video. So if you do it all by yourself, then you really don't need me. But if you don't have time or you don't want to do it yourself, then you're more than welcome to call me and hire me to help you.